Hey there, everybody. Happy Monday morning to you. Thanks for coming in for another Red Chip Heroes Poker podcast. Today, we're going to talk about optimizing your play for every stack size, small, medium, large, cash games, tournaments, all of it. And of course, I'm your boy Choppadong, brought to you by DFS Army and the Sharp app. We have a free Discord if you enjoy talking poker. We're building a robust poker community here inside the Sharp app Discord. Free to join. Click the link in the description below. There'll be a couple of links for you on the screen as we roll through the slides and dive into talking about stack sizes. Through discussion in the Discord this week, we had a lot of tournament talk. And while that is fun, I'm more of a cash game specialist. Doesn't mean I don't read, doesn't mean I don't know how to help with tournaments. It becomes apparent that, or it becomes, I guess, very, very obvious that you should know how to play every different stack size, from big to middle to short stack to critically short stack, to even one chip left behind stacks. There's a little bit of old school, a little bit of new school in this outline as we go through, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. I just want to encourage you to join in, become part of the community. Also, ask your questions. We will deal with those throughout the week, and you might even foster a topic for a podcast. You just never know. So, thanks again for liking and subscribing, turning on the notification bell. Let's dive into optimizing your play for every stack size. But first, of course, we're going to talk about a hand of a week. We've got a little bit of a new feature here today, and I kind of want to go through a hand that I played last week because I believe that it makes for a decent discussion point. We'll reveal the results at the end of the podcast, so stick around. Unless you're one of those guys that just scrolls through to the end, the TLDR type crowd. The middle position villain in this hand was an active, aggressive, kind of punty fish. The guy usually buys in a little bit short. He tends to really try to get in there and either punt his stack off and go home or double up. He's wild and crazy and gives a ton of action, but he doesn't usually bluff with like nothing, right? Like total airball bluffs are usually not in his game. He's usually at least got a little bit of something, but he also he balances. He plays his big hands pretty fast as well, just trying to get that double up. He tends to be a little afraid of flushy boards, things that people could draw out on. Because he doesn't want to get it in behind and then get sucked out on. He'd rather just end the hand now. That's a very common player type at the 1-2 and the 2-3, 2-5 type stakes in the casual world of poker, in the live low limit casino streets, mean streets. But this time we actually don't have the stack covered. He has the bigger stack. He's already doubled through once today, and he's sitting on a pretty healthy stack. I want to say about, 400 or so, but the effective stack is mine, $235 at 1-2 no limit live. The pre-flop action starts with a button straddle. If you're not familiar with a button straddle, in Missouri, we play what's called a Mississippi straddle, and you can put anywhere from double the big blind, so in this case, $4, to upwards of 5 times the big blind, or $10, on the button. Really, you can straddle from any position that you want. You can do this from under the gun, you can do this from middle position, and guys do, but the button has the first rights of the straddle. So if the button wants to straddle, nobody else can. And this particular button loves to straddle. He put out $7. That means that the action pre-flop starts in the blinds. It actually starts on the small blind. It doesn't start under the gun. It starts in the small blind, big blind, goes around the table, and that's going to be the general progression throughout the hand. If this particular Mississippi straddle had started, say, in middle position, then he puts out the $7. The player immediately to his left starts the pre-flop action, and it loops around the table, and then he actually gets the last action. It's kind of like buying a button, but then the rest of the hand progresses based on seats relative to the dealer button. There are other straddles where sometimes they come around, they start to in the blinds, they skip the straddle, they come back around, and then the straddle gets stacked. It's a weird configuration. I'm not familiar with that structure. A lot of the other structures that you find more standard are the under the gun straddle, which is just double the big blind from under the gun, and then the action starts to the left and it goes around like regular anyway. The Mississippi straddle is a little goofy in Missouri, but that's basically what we're dealing with. We've got a guy on the button who straddled to $7, and I was in the big blind. Hero is in the big blind and raises to $25, typically 3 to 4 times the straddle size will get the job done. Get it more down to a 1 or a 2-way pot, something that we can play a little bit of poker in, build a bigger pot with better premium hands anyway. Queen Jack of clubs certainly qualifies, so we raise it up to $25. Middle position, the villain in this hand that I was describing, he calls, just calls, didn't re-raise, just calls. And then the button calls as well. So now we have a $75 flop, and the board comes out Jack of spades, 10 of clubs, 10 of diamonds. Hey, not bad. Queen Jack, decent kicker, top pair, paired board, no flush draws, looks like fairly safe. Let's go ahead. We are a little bit vulnerable. We need some protection. We also have a lot of hands that we beat that will call and pay a sizable bet. So we bet $50, 2/3 the pot. Obviously, there are tons of debates here. Bet small, bet large, whatever. We chose 2/3 for our sizing, keeping relatively consistent with our general MO. And then the middle position villain just flat out shoves. Just sticks it all in. Says he's all in, 250 plus, covering Hero. Hero has about $160 left. What does Hero do? So, again, stick around to the end of the podcast. We'll reveal the results, talk a little bit more about this hand. But there's the general lay of the land. Take some notes, maybe put it in the discussion down there in the comments section, whatever you want to do, and we'll deal with it here towards the end of the podcast. So, when we're talking about optimizing for stack sizes, we can talk a little bit about cash games and tournaments. In a cash game, your stack size, I guess it doesn't really matter if it is a cash game or a tournament here in the beginning, because the stack size dictates the style of play and optimal approaches, no matter which format you're playing. Cash game, obviously, you can buy when you want. Tournament, the blinds go up, force you to play, and you only get one. Typically, you only get one starting, stack, and then when it's gone, you're out. Unless it is a rebuy tournament, of course, and then there is an eventual spot where the rebuys stop, and then it does kind of become more or less like your standard freeze-out tournament. When we're talking about stack sizes, your bigger stacks equal freedom. Big time freedom. I mean, if you're like me, you're picturing William Wallace in the background going, freedom! But my point is you've got some maneuverability. Your stack is not threatened yet. It's going to take a while to chip away at that stack to where you're critically committed to the pot, to where you have to go all in and defend a lot of, a wide range of hands. Generally, to get those big stacks to go to war back and forth, it takes a better than a one pair hand, probably two pairs, sets, straights, things like that. Small stacks, however, might only leave one option, and that's just flat out push. If you're only sitting on a, five times, 10 times the big blind type of stack, your only move really is kind of all in. That's what you're hoping, that you pick your hand accordingly, focus on some top pair holdings, shove it in, and hope for the best. You just don't have a lot of freedom. You don't have a lot of maneuverability. So what can be correct or an optimal play with one stack size can also be completely wrong with another stack size. That's kind of the gist. That's kind of where we're going with this. A good cash game player maximizes the money on the table. Okay, maximizes the stack depth. The max buy-in is rigid in cash games from the maximum buy-in. You can buy in short, you can buy in for, in a lot of cases, 30 to 60 big blinds, but the max buy-in is typically capped at 100 big blinds, maybe 200 big blinds. Some games do allow match the stack after the first hour of play. You match up to 75% of the deepest stack at the table, or you can just match it outright. Some games are uncapped, and you can match that stack as deep as it is. If it's a $1, $2 table and a guy sitting there with $5,000, and you want to put $5,000 on the table after that first hour, in some cases you can. It's important to know those rules, but generally speaking, we're talking about a capped game of 100 to 200 buy-ins, or big blinds. If you lose everything, you can just buy back in for the max and continue playing. That's just the way cash games go. The beauty of cash games also is you can cash out and leave whenever you want to as well. Good players outplay their opponents post-flop, though. The better player you are, the more of an edge you have over that table. You're going to want a deep stack. You're going to love having a deeper stack, because on the later streets, that's where the bigger bets go into the pot, and you can compound your opponent's mistakes. Most fishy cash game players play marginal hands, and they take them too far. So if they're going to take that hand, if they're going to call down with second pair or top pair bad kicker, and you've got that beat, and you've got the player type that's kind of, you're not punishing him for 10 or 20 bucks on the flop. You're punishing for 150 to 200 bucks on the river. And he's making an egregious mistake by calling at that point. But a lot of players do. That's where a large portion of our win rate comes from as cash game players, is on those deeper stacks and on turn and the river, where we can really compound that opponent's mistake. Good players in these cash games tend to top up. This is the mark of a fish. That, it's often said that if you sit down at a poker table in 30 minutes, you don't know who the fish is. It's you. Well, here's one way to kind of get an idea of who might be a fishy player. If you see a guy sit down with $200 and he chips down to 180, 160, 150, 120, and he's not reaching into his pocket or going to the podium to get more chips, and he's just sitting there letting his chip stack just dwindle away in a cash game, dwindle away, dwindle away. Probably a fish. He's a recreational player for sure. He's not in there for profit. He's trying to win money, don't get me wrong, but he's probably not a consistent profitable player. He's just there to slap and bang around some cards and some chips and hope he doesn't lose it all. And I've seen players get all the way down to their last 20, 30 bucks when they should be topping up to $200. If you get yourself down, I mean, personally, I'll sit at 200 to 250 bucks, sometimes $300 at my tables. And if I get down probably even 10% or 20% off of my starting stack, I just reach in my pocket, grab a few chips, and top it back up. Because the last thing you want to do is get chipped down to 50 bucks and then pick up your pocket aces and you only double up to $100. You'd rather keep it at 200 bucks, pick up those pocket aces and chip up to 400 bucks because now you can do some damage. You're going to maximize your win rate if you kind of stay what we would call topped up towards the maximum buy-in at the table. However, effective stacks are always in play. If I'm sitting at 200 big blinds and you're at 30 big blinds, it doesn't matter for me. I'm only going to win 30 big blinds off of you. That's all. You're only going to win 30 off of me. And that, again, changes the hand structure and the way we would play our stack sizes. So it's very important to keep an idea of what everybody at the table has in a cash game. Know where your short stacks are, know where your deep stacks are, and know your game plan ahead of time at how you're going to tackle certain hands in certain situations if these players start entering the pot, because it can change. With deep stacks, one pair hands are typically not as strong as most people think. Most people think, oh my God, I've got ace king, I've got top pair, top kicker, good, I'm all in. Yeah, on a deeper stack, that's going to get you in a whole lot of trouble because most people are not going to go all in without one pair beat. So you're on the you're at the wrong end of that one. With short stacks, though, these hands can easily go to the flop. You can have pocket tens and the board comes out 8 high, boom, all in, because it's really about all the flexibility and freedom that you have left. Or you can sit back and say, and this is a topic we will touch on someday, called SPR, or stack to pot ratio. When that number is small enough, let's say you've got $100. Let's say the pot on the flop is, I don't know, 50, 60 bucks. Well, your stack to pot ratio is you have 100 and the pot's 50. It's 2. 100 divided by 50 is 2. Your stack to pot ratio is 2, which mathematically means you have enough equity in the pot with an overpair in a lot of cases to just get it all in and hope that your tens aren't running into jacks or queens or something of that, or a set, something like that. If they do, they do. Mathematically, people are pushing in with wider ranges, poor enough ranges versus your particular holding that mathematically it makes sense for you to go ahead and go all in with them on a one pair hand or on a weaker holding on the flop because your stack is so short. Again, we'll touch on that down the road a little bit more. Certainly talk about it more in the Discord if you want. Just understand that when those stacks are deep, one pair hands are not as strong as most people, even aces. Board comes king high, aces may or may not be the type of hand that you really want to throw a 200, 300, 400, 500 big blind stack in the middle with, because the only things calling you are generally going to be ahead of you in that scenario. Or at least they're going to be drawing against you with a massive amount of equity. Playing a 100 big blind stack. Well, the bulk of default cash game strategy assumes 100 big blind stacks. Most starting hand charts, for reference, are defaulting to 100 big blind stacks. When they tell you under the gun you should be tens plus, pocket tens plus, ace king, ace queen suited, maybe a little bit of ace queen offsuit or king queen offsuit, but not much more. Maybe a little bit of ace five suited or 6-5 suited for a little bit of deception, whatever. When they're talking about that kind of stuff, the graphs that I've shown in pictures, you're talking about 100 big blind stacks. That stuff changes if you're down to 50 big blinds, or it changes if you're up to 200 something big blinds. Most starting hand charts reference those stack sizes. Now, remember, it's very, very important. position also dictates play. If we're sitting on those 100 big blind stacks, you're going to see charts for how do you play under the gun? How do you play from middle position? How do you play from the cutoff or late position? You're generally going to be very tight early, like I mentioned just a second ago, pocket 10s and better, maybe 8s and better, ace 5 suited, maybe ace king, ace queen suited, king queen, king jack suited, maybe king jack suited, ace king, ace queen offsuit maybe, but probably not ace jack offsuit from under the gun. But as you get closer and closer and closer to the button, if it folds to you and you're the first one to enter the pot, if you remember from previous podcasts, we don't limp, we don't just put the $2 in there and call. We're coming in for a raise. And we can do it with a lot wider range because there are fewer players to act after us. It's easier to get the pot heads up, and there's more likelihood they'll just fold and we'll just steal the blinds, and we don't need much of a hand to do that with anyway. So tight early, loose late. That's where those hand charts are going to start to gravitate towards, and you'll see them include more and more hands the closer and closer and closer you get to the button when you're looking at those charts. We're going to pin some starting hand charts into our poker Discord rooms soon. I'm working on those. I'm going to develop those and just put them in there for reference. Honestly, again, it's a free poker room. It's a free poker community. There's the link right there. Give us a join. Come on in. Talk to us. We don't bite. We can handle anybody from the very, very beginning poker player that wants to learn how to play the game to the intermediate that has most of the fundamentals figured out and is just wanting to get better. Playing a 35 to a 50 big blind stack. Well, those medium stacks make up for the bulk of online tournament play. That's kind of where they start, and it's what they dwindle to quickly when they start deeper. There's not a lot of room for pre-flop creativity, and hand selection becomes very, very important. You just don't have implied odds. You don't have a deeper stack to win. There's a rule called 15, 25, 30 that we might get into at some point, talking about pocket pairs, suited connectors, and things that we need to know that you have enough chips for us to win when we hit our hand, that it will pay off in the long run for the infrequency of our hand connecting strongly and being able to play for stacks. That implied odds, the implied money that we can win, definitely matters. And on a medium-sized stack, 30 to 50 big blinds, we just don't have it. We're not going to be playing pocket threes and hoping to flop a set, because again, the stacks are just not deep enough to win most of the time. We're going to be focused a little bit more. We're going to essentially, your drawing hands lose value. You know, your 6-7 suited, your ace-5 suited, those types of hands that require multiple flops and turns and things to come out to develop our hand. We just don't have the time when the big bets go into the pot to chase those hands. We're going to crush our own stack before we ever get there. A top pair hand, however, like an ace-queen or a jack, pocket jacks, that type of hand actually gains value. So those medium stacks often play like, there's a pre-flop raise and then a flop bet and then a turn shove because it's all you've got left. I used to start my stacks in cash games with 80% of the maximum buy-in because it got me to shove the turn an awful lot. I would have about a pot-sized bet left on the turn, and I would just put it in there. I didn't have the skill to play rivers effectively yet, so I didn't have to worry about it. I was all in, and it was over and done. Very effective if you know how to play shorter stacks. Very effective methodology. Position loses a little bit of an edge when you play short like that, though, because, again, it doesn't matter if you are acting after me anymore because you're not getting any additional information. We're both already all in. Once we're already all in, there's no more decision. There's no more information for you to gather. The chips are in the middle and the cards are coming. So again, the earlier you can mitigate that early position disadvantage a little bit with a shorter stack. Okay, certainly a medium-sized stack. If we want to move on to a little bit shorter stack, playing 15 to 30 big blinds deep in the tournaments and things, in cash games, short stackers like this really, really bear paying attention to. They will shove over raises until they bust or double up, kind of like the friend in the hand of the week that I told you about. They'll sit short and they'll wait. And you'll raise, and then all of a sudden, boink, they'll come right over the top of you and force you to call them off with all their chips. I've got guys that do this repeatedly with $50 to $75 to $80 or so, and you just got to be ready for them. You've got to know where they're sitting, and you've got to know what they're willing to do. You pick up a hand like pocket nines, and you raise it to $12, and he comes into you for $75. You've got to be willing to pay him off sometimes. You've got to know who he is. So you're not really raising your 6-7 suiteds because you're not going to call him when he shoves over the top. So you tighten up a little bit against those short stackers at your table. But you definitely know who they are, and you definitely get ready to call them down when you do have a decent hand, because they're going to be doing this light. They're going to be doing this ace 10 offsuit. They're going to be doing this sometimes with pocket fours and things like that. And you can definitely make their life a little bit of hell too. But it gets difficult when that guy's sitting in the middle of, you have $600 and that other guy over there has $800, and then there's this little bitty guy with $100 in the middle, and you raise and he shoves and then the other guy folds, or you raise and he shoves and the other guy calls. Those are nightmares sometimes. But again, you've got to be ready for them in cash games. That's what these guys are sitting there trying to do, is bust or double up, and that's all they're playing for. In tournaments, however, mastering that short stack play has a lot more nuance to it. It's actually just vital to your survival. You need to play very aggressive pre-flop. Raise. Don't just call and try and save your chip stack. Use your chip stack. Oftentimes there's a theory called the hammer of future betting, or future bets, or future streets. If I have a stack behind me and I put in a $10 10 big blind raise in a tournament, and I've got 50 or 60 big blinds behind me, I'm still intimidating to play with, because you don't know how willing I am to use that stack. How much pressure I'm willing to put on you and threaten your stack. Okay? You pick your spot wisely. You've got to be patient, but you pick your spot wisely, and when it's time to go, you go. You absolutely go. In this spot, just a quick example off the top of my head, you're 20 big blinds deep. You're getting kind of towards the later stages of a tournament, or the bubble stage of a tournament. The hijack is an aggressive player, and he raises to 2.25 big blinds. Very standard raise size in these tournament structures. And folds to you in the small blind, and you have king jack offsuit. Re-steal. He's probably stealing the blinds. He's putting pressure on the blinds to fold. He knows that the cutoff and the button will probably just get out of the way and not get involved, and then he has the blinds, and he picks up 1 and 2 big blind, 3 big blinds right there for only risking 2 1/4 big blinds of his own. And he can do that with a pretty wide range. He might have something as weak as 5-6 suited. He might have something as weak as ace 3 offsuit. He might have something 9-10 offsuit. A wide range some players will use to steal the blinds like this. So knowing that he's on a wide range, if you pick up something reasonable, something kind of ahead of that overall range, re-steal with it. You get king jack offsuit, bam, bust his ass to 7 big blinds. Put the pressure back on him. Now, if he doesn't have anything, he's going to kind of just fold. And now you've picked up the big blind. You've kept your small blind. You've picked up the big blind for 2. Probably picked up a big blind ante. And you've picked up his 2 1/4 big blinds. You probably just profited 6 big blinds on your own. And if you're really good and you know how this guy acts and how wide he is and that he can fold, you can do this with a bunch of garbage yourself in some bluffing scenarios. But in this scenario, we raised to 7 big blinds. We tried to re-steal, and the hijack calls. The flop is 14 big blinds in the pot, and you only have 13 left in your stack. It's basically a pot-sized bet, right? And the pot comes queen, 7, 9 rainbow on the flop. Just rip it, man. Follow through. Follow through. You've got an overcard king. You've got a gut shot draw to actually, you've got the king and the jack there, so you only need the 10. You can run off the 10. You can run off an ace. You can end up with a lot of good stuff. If you have if you were king jack suited, say with diamonds, and there was 1 diamond on the flop, you have what's called a backdoor flush draw, which means the turn can be a diamond, then the river can be a diamond and give you a flush. There's a lot of potential that you do have to save your bacon here. So use that fold equity that you have in him being scared to go all in such a big pot when he was really only just kind of trying to see a flop or steal the blinds, and you throw it right in his face and put him to the test. That's how you play tournaments, and play tournaments well, is in scenarios like this. And various others that, again, we'll talk about through time. Playing a tiny stack, under 15 big blinds. You should never be this shallow in a cash game. Never. Like I said before, top up. Top up, top up, top up. But in a tournament situation, it's almost push or fold time. Old school theory pushed at 10 big blinds. It was big enough to intimidate everybody and really tighten up their ranges and make sure that they called. If they called, they had a premium hand. So you would do it with aces and kings and queens yourself, but you would also do it with some 6-7 suited, so that when you got called by aces, you had a very good equity hand against the aces. I mean, you were going to lose, but you weren't going to lose like you would if you had pocket 3s or pocket 10s. You still have a little bit of a better chance, about a 5% better chance, and that can make all the difference for you if you get a little bit lucky. So at 10 big blinds, boom, push. Well, the new school theory doesn't do that. You should be observing the table, especially smaller live local tournaments in casinos, in your local casinos. You should definitely be studying. your players at your table. Who's folding? Who's willing to gamble? Who's not? If a 10 big blind shove is not going to get called, then go ahead and bluff with it. But if it is going to get called, you need to be doing it with realistic cards. However, some won't be picking on your blinds relentlessly or picking on your stack relentlessly, and some will let you blind down to 9, 8, 7, 6, 5 before you really have to start pushing yourself. So you can get those extra few orbits out of the deal, out of the situation. Sorry, my nose is itching today. But you can kind of get deeper and deeper and deeper into your stack. If you've still got enough, my home games will let you get down to even 3 big blinds, and then you just go all in with the 3, and nobody wants to call that, even though it's ridiculous. The math is there that they should be calling with a very wide range. They don't, so you can use, again, poker's about exploiting your competition. What do they do too much of? Well, they fold too much in my home games on when shorter stacks go pushing, because they only see the raise size of, that's 3 big blinds or 4 big blinds. They don't want to lose that in their stack. So they will fold, which allows me to bluff. And it allows me not to start doing that at 7 or 8 big blinds. It allows me to get all the way down to 3 or 4. Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to be doing it at 10 big blinds or even 15. What it allows you to do, though, is maximize, aggressively steal those blinds and antes because they know your next bet is probably an all-in on the flop, and you maximize that fold equity and that short stack threat. There are a ton of push-fold charts to cover, that cover 20 big blind, 15, 10 big blind scenarios, and even less, 5, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever. Study those push-fold charts. You can Google them. They're easy to find. And the new school theory is leaving a chip behind. You're not going all in. If I have 9 big blinds, I'm not going all in. I'm going to push 8. I'm going to keep a chip back there. It might not even be a full big blind, but I'm going to keep a chip behind me. The reason why I'm going to keep a chip behind me is I'm not dead. I'm not completely dead. If they let me get away with it and I lose, I've still got a chip. And what ICM stands for is Independent Chip Model. It is a theory of value. Every chip in a tournament has some monetary value. And the later you get in the tournament stages, the more important that value becomes to your actual cash and your actual chances of cashing. Sometimes those chips are so valuable that you don't want to just willy-nilly ditch them. So you're not shoving all 7 big blinds in pre-flop. You're going to shove in 6.8 or something like that and keep a chip back behind so that if nobody forces you, nobody re-raises you and forces you all in, then you've still got that chip in case things go wrong. And it actually does give you a non-zero chance to come back and win the tournament, which could have a monetary value to it when you study the ICM models that are out there these days. Again, that's an more advanced theory or more advanced concept to work on. And we can certainly do that as time goes on and we get better. But for now, it's probably not the best for this particular podcast. That kind of covers an awful lot of the chip stack sizes, gives you some basic rough ideas of how you should maybe play those. We will work on those charts and we will put those in the Discord rooms for us to discuss and us to look at. But it's time for the reveal. The hand of the week reveal. If you remember, we had Queen Jack suited. We raised the 25, mid-position called, flop, bet of 50 into the $75 pot. The middle position player pushed all in. He's a wild player, but he's not usually a crazy reckless player. He's usually doing it with something. And he's covering us on a Jack 10-10 flop. The questions in-game that I had to ask myself in this scenario to handle it correctly in my mind was, would Villain ever do this with a random 10? Would he call my pre-flop raise with a 10? Sure, ace 10, king 10, jack 10, 9 10, stuff like that, probably, especially if it's suited. I've seen him push nutted hands like this before, so I think that it stands well within his range of hands that he would do this. A lot of people would slow play that 10, and I think that he would. I think he would slow play ace 10. I think he might slow play king 10, stuff like that, but he might not slow play 10-8. He might be afraid, that hand's a little bit vulnerable, even though it's not that much different on this board. So I've seen him push big hands like this before, if he thinks there's draws out there against him. Can he call pre-flop with aces, kings, queen? No, he doesn't do that. So aces, queens, kings, those types of overpairs to this 10-10 jack flop are not out there because he would have re-raised my $25 bet. Once he doesn't re-raise my $25 bet, I can take aces and kings and queens and just throw them out. He does not have those cards. They're gone. And no matter what the board runs out, throughout the hand, I can't just take those hands and put them back into his range. They don't exist. He would have re-raised me pre-flop with those hands, for sure. Could he have draws like King Queen? Probably. 8-9, open-ended on the top and the bottom end of that Jack 10-10. Yes, he probably could have those hands. Could he have other draws like Ace King suited in a heart, and there's a heart on the flop, and he has the backdoor flush draw to go with the Ace King for an over? Yeah, but again, he probably would have re-raised me pre-flop with Ace King suited, so that's probably not very likely. Then he has that hand. King Queen suited for sure. There are hands like that he will have, so he could have some big draws like that, and that would be opportunity for him to end it now with the worst hand and get me to fold something like a jack, or maybe even pocket queens or something like that, thinking that it's just too much of a bet to handle, and my hand isn't strong enough to risk. Could he have better Jack X hands? Yes, he could have King Jack. I mean, he could have Queen Jack too, but he could have King Jack. He could have Ace Jack for sure. Those are hands that would not re-raise me pre-flop. These are the things you've got to go through in your mind as your range funneling or hand reading live at the table. You got to do this in tournaments. You got to do this in cash games. You got to sit back and say, does he have a lot of 10? Okay, he has 10s. Does he have aces or king? No, probably not. Does he have draws? Yeah, he probably does. Does he have, a better jack? If I call this, am I going to see King Jack here sometimes or Ace Jack? Yeah, probably. How often? I don't know. That's when you start counting combinations of possibilities in your head. That's hard to do at the table in real time. It's easier to do when you study off the table. Again, more things we can talk about inside the Discord room. But does he have bluffs like Ace King offsuit that really don't have a lot going for them? That's not a worst bluff because he's got two overcards. Ace Queen, Ace King. Yeah, Ace King probably re-raises. Ace Queen might not. Ace Jack might not. Pocket sevens? Pocket sixes? I don't think he's just throwing it all in with those, hoping to get a fold. I think he would just fold to my $50 bet with those hands. So there is a mixture of some things that he has in here. And when I put it in myself and ran my range for him through my equity calculators, we're pretty far behind because he has some 10s and he has some Ace Jack and things like that. We're pretty far behind. So I believe that in game I made the right call in not risking my entire stack, and I folded. I only had one friend that I asked tell me that I probably should have called. And most reasonable poker players that I respect, that I talked to about this hand, all of them said, yeah, you got to fold there to that guy. There are guys you would call this with, but to that guy, you probably fold. And these are people that know him as well in the card room and said, yeah, you probably got to fold to him there. And it's just not really, you're going to find hands that beat you probably a little more often than you're going to find hands that you beat. Although there probably are some hands in there that you do beat. Jack 9, type of hands maybe that would do this. So it's a tough spot. They all agreed it's a pretty debatable spot, a pretty tough spot. And like I said, the only guy that I saw say to call had very good reasoning for it. And he would have been right. I got bluffed. The guy had 8-7 offsuit. So imagine this. My range of this guy's hand is wrong. And I need to adjust that range going forward and give him much wider possibilities than what I was giving and what I thought was reasonable. I raised to 25. Yes, it's a straddled pot to 7, and I raised to 25, but he had clearly didn't give a crap about what I had. He wasn't thinking about what I had because he did it with 8-7 offsuit, which is just a disaster of a hand to call $25 pre-flop with. Probably had it made up in his mind that he was going to bluff with that hand anyway. Probably has me pegged as a tighter player that he can bluff. He was right. But on my flop bet of 50, he just came all the way over the top and shoved it all in. Because now he does have a 9 backing him up for a straight. But he's got to be thinking he might find a 10. He might find a jack. He might find kings or aces. I don't know what he thinks he can get me to fold there. But, yep, made a mistake. That's what happens. That's how the cookie crumbles. If you are always getting to showdown with the best hand, you're doing it wrong. If you are never folding the winning hand, you're doing it wrong. There's going to be some of that. Now, all we can do is learn from this, apply it going forward, and make sure we play him a little bit better the next time. Very easy to do. I had a couple other hands I could have shared, but I felt like this one was good. I might save one for next week. We'll see where we go. Bottom line is, always be aware of your stack sizes. I mean, he had so much behind that he put 250 over the top, forced my whole stack in the middle. If he only put $20 in there, I would have called, but he didn't have that. He had 250, and it changed the way I would play that hand because of his stack size. In cash games, stay topped up so you can intimidate people like that, so that you can turn around and really whack them with an all-in bluff if you want to. In tournaments, every size of stack has its pros and cons. We just looked at some of the small, medium, and large stacks. Some of them we want to play for top pair value. Some of them we can draw with. Some of them we want to use to intimidate and re-steal. Some of them we have plenty of flexibility and maneuverability, with big stacks and things like that. You have to be aware of how your stack size changes poker strategy, how it changes the range of hands that you start with and the ranges of hands that you will play aggressively post-flop. There's no one size fits all. You're always adjusting. You're always taking in as much information as you can, which is why position is so important. Act last, act last, act last. Get all that information that you can and make better decisions with it. And of course, always be aware of the effective stacks. That you could have $10,000 sitting at the table. If that guy there only has $50, it's all you can win. Be aware of how that effective stack size also changes your strategy as well as his, even if you're the deeper stack. I'll leave you with the link there again to the Discord room. Join our free Discord. Jump on in and start talking to us. Hopefully you like this. Give me a thumbs up. Share it across with your friends. Let your friends know that if they want to learn how to play poker, I can get them to beat 1-2 low-limit cash games. I can get them to beat their daily casino tournaments. I can get them to beat some of the smaller stakes online stuff very, very easily. And we can talk everything from heads-up displays to bankroll management to tournament selection to different games like PLO and Badoogie and everything that you want to learn how to play. We can learn it all together. I can coach you in these areas. I'm a winning poker player here in St. Louis, and I can get you fundamentally sound and put you on the right winning track. So turn those notifications on. You'll get next week's poker podcast when it drops. Thanks for tuning in to Red Chip Heroes Poker Podcast, brought to you by DFS Army and the Sharp app team. And we'll see you in our Discord. Take care, everybody.